In this video, I'm going to show you how to add sprites and animations to a game. You can see here we have an idle animation, a run animation, and a jump animation. Right now, we have movement and our jumping works, but visually the game is still very basic. So let's turn this into something that actually looks like a proper game. For this game, I'm using this asset pack called Pixel Adventure, created by Pixel Frog. Shout out to them. It includes sprites and animation for a full character, and it also includes tiles, which we will use later for creating our tile map. I'll leave a link for the download in the description. For this, I will create a new folder called imported assets. I will take my zip file and just drag straight into this folder. And now we have all these assets, and I will go to the folder called main characters, and I will use this Ninja Frog character. Just note that these characters have a pixel size of 32 by 32, as you can see from the description. And when we are setting up animations later, remember that they have a speed of 20 frames per second or 50 milliseconds. So you can see if we're just going to one of these sprites for the Ninja Frog, they have pixels per unit, which is default set to be 100. But these are 32 by 32, so I will mark all of them and I will set it to 32 pixels per unit, and I will hit apply. Setting these sprites to 32 by 32, make sure that the sprite matches our world scale. If this is wrong and the pixels unit, for instance, would be 100, the character won't fit properly with the rest of the game. We also need to go to this variable called filter mode and change it from bilinear to point. This keeps the pixel art sharp instead of blurry. Now we can go to our player game object, and you can see it has a sprite renderer component with a sprite variable attached on it. So I'm going to go to these idle sprites, and I will take the first frame of the idle sprite and just drag into my sprite component. And just by replacing the sprite, this already looks a lot better. Next, we'll create our animations. For this, we're firstly going to open up our animations window by going to the window tab, go to animation, and we're going to need two windows for this. Firstly, we're going to use the animation window, which we can just drag around and place wherever we want. I will place mine here in the bottom right corner, and we will go to this section again and open up the animator, which I will also drag right here next to my animation. For animations, Unity needs two things: an animation clip, which contains all the frames for our animation, and an animator controller, which controls which animations to play and when to play them. For this, I'm going to create a new folder in my assets folder, and I will call it animation. And in here, I will right click, go to create, go to animation, and I will create an animator controller for our player. I'll just call this player anim controller. And I'll also create one animation clip by going to create, animation, animation clip, and I will call this one idle. Now we can go to our player and go to add component, animator, and you can see this new component requires an animator controller. So we can take our controller and drag into this window. We can double click it to open it up. And this changes this animator window to use our player animator controller. And in my animator window, I will take my idle animation and drag over here. You can see it turns orange. That means it's the default state. Being the default state means that this animation will be the starting animation when you play your game. So I think it makes pretty good sense to have the idle animation here. Now that we've dragged that in, we can go to our animation window, and you can see we have the idle animation from the dropdown. And it's the only selectable animation since we've only created one clip and dragged it into the animator. Currently, the samples we use are set to frames per second. If yours is for some reason set to milliseconds, or you would like it to be milliseconds, you can go to these three dots here and you can switch between seconds and frames. I'm going to stick to frames for this one. And if you remember where we got our asset pack from, it was noted that every animation is either 50 milliseconds or 20 frames per second. So I'm going to change my sample rate from 60 to 20 and hit enter. Now that we've got this animation window set up, we can go to our assets folder and our imported assets. I will go to my main character Ninja Frog, and I have these frames for the idle animation, which we can expand. I will highlight the first one, hold down left shift and highlight the last one, and I can simply drag them into the animation window. If you want to see how the animation plays, you can hit this play button. You can see we have the idle animation now. And if you want, you can speed it up, slow it down, whatever. I will set this to 60 just to show you what that would look like. And yeah, this is going way too quick, so I think 20 is really a nice fit. Now that we have our idle animation set up, and this is set to be the default entry state, we can now try to play our game. You can see it actually doesn't really do anything. That is because it plays the idle animation once, and then the animation is over and it goes back to the non-animated state. We can fix this by going back to our animations folder and go to our idle animation, and we can tick this box called loop time. This just ensures that the animation is looping. So now that we play our game, it sticks to our idle animation. And you can see it kind of clips through the platform, but we won't spend time fixing this right now, as we won't be using the platform when we implement tile maps in a later video. So now we've set up our animation controller and our first animation, and here comes your first challenge for the video. Try creating a run animation and a jump animation. Remember, create the animation clip for each animation and set these up with the correct frames. Also make sure that if you want your animation to loop, that you tick this box on the animation clip which says loop time. Pause the video now, give it a good go, and then come back to see my solution. Okay, welcome back. We needed to create the jump and run animations. For this, I'm going to create 2 new animation clips in our animation folder. I will do this by right-clicking, go to Create, Animation, Animation Clip. I will call the first one Run, and I will create another animation clip, which I will call Jump. I will take these 2 animations and drag into our Animator window. And now if we go to our animation window, you can see the drop-down menu not only contains idle, but also run and jump. First, let's set up the run animation, and we're going to change the sample rate from 60 to 20. Then I'm going to head into my imported assets, find the Ninja Frog character. I will go to the frames for my run animation, expand these, highlight the first one, hold down left shift, highlight the last one, drag these in. We can play to see how it looks. So this is a run/walking animation. And then I can go to my jump animation, also set the sample rate to 20. And for this, you can see you can't really expand this. This is because it actually only has 1 frame. So we'll just take this single frame and drag in. And now when we play, this is how a jump animation will look. Now we need to go to the animation clips and set our run to loop time and set our run to be looping. And the jump does not need to loop as it only has 1 single frame. Now that we've got our animation set up, we need to connect these. We will go to our animator window. I'll just zoom in a bit, drag this away a bit to make more room. I'll set my jump here, I'll run here. Again, it doesn't matter where you place them. It's just nice to place them in a way where you can clearly see what's going on. To control our animations and make it communicate with our C# scripts, we need to create something which is called parameters. These parameters are basically you can see we have this tab called parameters, and these parameters basically work as triggers to tell our animator when to switch from one animation to another animation. For this, we're going to add 2 parameters. I'm going to hit the plus sign. We can add either float, int, bool, or trigger. I will add a float, which will be called moveX. MoveX represents our horizontal movement. And for the second parameter, I will add a bool, which will be called isGrounded. And this will represent whether the player is on the ground or not. And the way to use these is that in our script, we can enter these parameters and from there decide which animation to play. But firstly, we need to create what is called transitions. So if I'm going to create a transition from idle to run, I will right-click my animation, make transition, and I have this arrow now which I can drag to other animations, and I will drag it and place it on run. And instead of 1 transition, we will actually use 2. So I will create another transition, also set this to run. You can see it now has 3 arrows. This just represents that there's multiple transitions on this line. So if I click this line, our 2 transitions comes up, idle to run, idle to run. And to trigger these transitions, we will use conditions. So I will go to one of my transitions, just the top one now, and I will hit the plus sign. And you can see we have the parameters here. I will use the moveX is greater than 1.0. So if we're moving in a positive direction, and for the other transition, I'll also create a condition where moveX is less than minus 0.1. So for 2 transitions, either we're moving in a positive direction, which makes our moveX greater than 0.1, or that we're moving in a negative direction, which means moving to the left, where our moveX will be less than minus 0.1. The reason I'm using 2 transitions instead of 1 is that for simpler transitions, you could just use, let's say, a float, which was called speed, and if that was above 0, the player is moving, and we could trigger the run animation. But if we only check if the speed is above 0, transitions can be kind of flickery or behave inconsistently. So by checking the moveX value on 2 parameters, gives us a more stable animation switching. And we're also going to use the moveX to set our run to idle transition. So I'm going to right-click my run, make transition, drag it towards idle, and I'm going to click the transition. And for this, I'm going to make 2 conditions. One, where moveX is greater than minus 0.1, and the moveX must also be less than 0.1. So now we only transition from our run to our idle animation if we're absolutely sure that we're not moving. So now comes your next challenge of this video. Try setting up a jump transition. Pause the video now and give it a try. Okay, welcome back. We transition to the jump animation when isGrounded is false. So from idle, I'm going to create a transition towards jump, and I'm also going to create a transition from run to jump. And both of these transitions will use one condition, isGrounded is false. because if isGrounded is false, we will be in the air and we would like to trigger a jump animation. Of course, we also need to create transitions from jump to idle and from jump to run, and this will be the exact opposite. So we will make one condition for each where isGrounded is true. You could go above and beyond on this and make sure that isGrounded is true and we are not moving, but the animation from idle to run will trigger so instantly that you won't really notice it anyway. So to keep it simple, we will just use the isGrounded parameter. One last thing we need to set up animations correctly. You can see if we go to a transition, we have what is called exit time, and if we expand the settings menu, we also have what is called transition duration. This is how long it takes to transition from one animation to another. This works great for 3D games, but for 2D games, it looks a lot better if animations respond instantly. So therefore, we're going to go to each of our transitions and untick has exit time and set our transition duration to 0. So I'm just going to quickly remove exit time from each of these. Now that we have our animation controller and our animation clip set up, we need to connect our animations to our player controller script. I'm going to go to my assets folder. In my scripts folder, I'm going to open up the player controller script. And the first thing we're going to do is set up our animator. So I'm going to create a private animator called player animator. And I'm going to set my player animator equal to get component of the component animator in our wake, just as we did with our Rigidbody 2D. And now we need to create a method for updating our animations. So I'm going to scroll here to the bottom. I'm going to create private void update animations. And we're going to use our player animator. And the animator has extension methods, which we can use to manipulate the parameters which we've created in Unity. So we can use animator.setFloat, and we can take our moveX in a string. Remember to spell this the exact way you've spelled it out in the editor. And since we are already reading from our movement variable, we can just use the movement.x. Now we can also use our player animator.setBool. The bool was called isGrounded. And to jump, we already use our isGrounded bool, so we can just use that as well. So what this method basically does is that it sends our movement and grounded state to the animator. The animator doesn't know anything about our gameplay, so we need to constantly tell it what's going on. And now we just need to call this in update. So I'm going to scroll to my update method, update animations, save the script, and let me just expand my game view a bit here. But I would also like to keep my animator window open. And if we jump, it goes to a jump and goes back to the idle animation when we land. If we're moving either left or right, it triggers our run animation, which is also looping. And when we stand still, it goes back to the idle. One last thing I would like to add is to make sure that the player faces the correct direction depending on where we're moving. So we're going to head back into our player controller script. And what we need here is to access the player's sprite renderer. So I'm going to create a private sprite renderer. Let's just call it sprite renderer as well. And in the awake method, you already know the drill. We're going to set our sprite renderer equal to get component of the type sprite renderer. Now we can create a new method. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, private void flip sprite. And we need to make sure that the player sprite is flipped on the x-axis depending on if we're moving left or right. We're going to check this with two simple if statements. If our movement.x is less than 0, so if we're moving to the left, we're going to access our sprite renderer component, and it has the extension method flipX, and we will set this to true. But we also need to flip it back, so we're going to use an else if statement. If our movement.x is greater than 0, then we're going to access the sprite renderer .flipX method and set it to false. And of course, for this to work, we also need to call this in our update method. And now when we play a game, if we're moving to the left, the sprite will flip, and to the right, the sprite will flip back. And this also works for our animations. Well done on this video. In the next video, we'll build on this and add a double jump and an animation for a double jump. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.